Hey everyone, welcome. Let me start by asking you this question. What conversations have you had, or maybe you're currently having, with other parish leadership around how to foster a pathway of evangelization and discipleship at your parish? And what have been some of the challenges that you have faced in those conversations? Recently, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Nick Hardesty, who works for the Center for New Evangelization in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. His role there is the Associate Director for Adult Evangelization in OCIA. Now, Nick, along with a few of his coworkers, in the past few years, has been able to develop this really wonderful tool called the Process of Evangelization and Discipleship Diagram. Now, because this tool is so rich in Catholic teaching and systematic processes, it literally took the conversation to be broken up into two episodes. So, in this first episode, Nick and I talk about the development of the document and why it's so important for parishes to be using. And then in the second episode, Nick breaks down for us the different stages of evangelization and the different thresholds of discipleship, and how this diagram really helps us to understand the relationship between the two. Now, we also share with you how you can get the document and start using it at your parish as well. So let's jump into this first episode together and let's see what we can learn and take away from this document. Nick, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm really excited to have you here. We've gotten to know each other, I don't know, over the past maybe 5 years. We met on Form an Intentional Disciple
Mhm.
um,
Facebook group.
Facebook group. We share a passion, a similar passion, and really help to awaken parishes and leadership to the importance of a personal journey of discipleship, as
Hmm.
well as a deeper understanding of why it's important for our parishes to shift from that maintenance mentality to a true missionary parish.
Hmm.
And I'm excited because you have something I believe incredible to share that you developed while working alongside the in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati in the office of the Center for New Evangelization. So thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank
why
you
don't
for having me.
yeah, it's great here having you here, man. Tell us a little bit about your role. What is it that you do with the Center of New Evangelization?
Yeah, so within the center, we have different sub teams. And so I'm on a parish support team. And I'm the Associate Director of Adult Evangelization and OCIA. So my job is really to uh, form, equip, and coach. So I have a lot of one-on-one meetings with parish ministry leaders, also with parish staff and evangelization teams. And we just talk about how to renew their ministries to adults, how to overcome the obstacles to renewal, how to evangelize, how to make disciples. We'll do some long-term, long-range evangelization planning. And like you said, trying to help move the needle, and make that transition from maintenance to mission. Something I talk about every day. You have to play the long game.
Yeah.
It's not easy work, but it's very rewarding for me. I love what I do. I love the people that I get to work with every day. So I feel really blessed to do this.
Yeah. One thing that I've learned with the pastors and leadership that I work with over the time that I've done it, very important word, patience.
Yeah.
Patience, and I often find both the pastors and the key leaders and myself at times becoming impatient, because we want what we want so badly that we just want it for others right now.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest things is understanding that it's really God who transforms. It's not us. We're we're trying to discern and understand his plan and be a part of that plan, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
that's,
trusting in that plan,
yep,
and trusting that he has a good plan for every parish
yeah,
and he knows exactly what it takes to make disciples in that place.
yep,
And we just have to, through prayer and discernment, but also through knowledge and skills and bringing the gifts that God has given you, you try to find a way to enter into that good plan and play your part to make it a reality.
yeah, amen. Yeah, that's it. So while in this role, with this office, you developed, I believe, and I think others believe, a very significant tool that you're using in your work in helping leaders, pastors really understand this process of evangelization and discipleship. You guys created a diagram,
Mhm.
a great visual diagram, and for listeners on our podcast, there'll be in the show notes a PDF of this document, so you can look at it. But you created this diagram. Um, why? Why did you guys feel it was so important to do that?
Yeah. So, like most dioceses in the nation, we are in the midst of a pastoral planning process. And so, being the Center for the New Evangelization, our task is to help parishes with one of the principles of the process, which is evangelization, or pillars, I should say, of the process. And so, we're coming together and we're thinking about how we can help parishes to really wrap their brains around everything that is at stake in the mission of making disciples and evangelizing people. And when you talk to people in the field and when you read the church documents on this, it it's real easy to get caught in the weeds. And there's a lot of theology, there's a lot of terminology, there's a lot of principles and methods, and all this stuff can really make your head spin.
Hmm.
So, our desire and my desire as sort of the project lead for this endeavor was to help people to just see it all simply, how everything works together in ministry to bring a person to missionary discipleship. Um, and so, we just thought that there has to be a way to illustrate this so that you can just see it in sort of a bird's eye view, everything that's at stake here, right? Um, so we decided on a flower because our symbol in the center is a rose window, and so as I began to look at how we could create this, you sort of realize that there's two processes at stake. There's like a process of evangelization, then there's also a process of discipleship or the journey of faith. And so what the flower does is it brings those two processes together. It shows how they sort of overlap and interpenetrate. And from the perspective of the minister, what this does is it really helps you to see pretty clearly and quickly um, how to meet people where they are and help to facilitate progression along their journey of faith that leads to missionary discipleship.
Hmm.
And to us, that's really foundational knowledge. You can't really engage in intentional ministry unless you know how to meet people where they are. And, if I could steal a phrase from Dynamic Catholic, meet people where they are and lead them to where God is calling them to be, which is, I think, what this diagram helps people to do.
Hmm. Yeah, when you were providing that image flower for us and really talking about the relationship, the importance relationship of evangelization and discipleship, it was making me think, what a wonderful image of the pollination
Right.
that happens as a result of one's heart being evangelized. It really
Mhm.
pollinates the life of
Yeah.
a disciple, and then as disciples grow in the heart of the parish, it really pollinates the mission aspect of the parish, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like, a flower has a lot of good connotations for evangelization and disciple making. You know, flowers, they progress or they grow through stages, and so there's a connotation of growth, maturation, of life, like you said, of pollination. You grow to the point to where you're able to create life in other places, right? And so just the flower all by itself is really an apt image. And so we can capitalize that and use that to help people understand what ministry is all about and what the journey of faith is all about.
Yeah. So, can you simply, I know there's a lot in the diagram,
Yeah.
but simply walk us through, help us visualize a little bit of what it is that you put together in this diagram as the process and the relationship between evangelization and discipleship.
Yeah. So for the podcast listeners, just close your eyes. Well, unless you're driving, then you want to keep your eyes open. But see if you can just imagine a flower with 8 petals evenly distributed around the center of the flower. Okay. That's really what this diagram looks like. It also has arrows that sort of wrap around the outside of the flower, and they begin and end at certain petals. So if you can imagine this in your mind, then you're 90% of the way there. But like Darren said, we'll also have a PDF you can download and you can look at all this. We've got an info packet that breaks down all the parts and what every piece of it means. Um, but at any rate, on this flower, you have 8 petals, and these petals represent thresholds along the journey of faith. So the notion of thresholds in the Catholic Church is really popularized by Sherry Waddell. She has a book called Forming Intentional Disciples. And in that book, she talks about pre-conversion thresholds. So these are like um, markers of progression along the journey of faith that leads up to the decision to become a follower of Jesus. That's what the pre-conversion thresholds are. But then there's also post-conversion thresholds. As you continue to move around the pedal, you'll see those too. And those are markers of progression and maturation of the disciple, moving from beginning discipleship to missionary discipleship. And so the 8 petals that sort of splayed out around the flower, these represent thresholds along the journey of faith. But then on the diagram, you also have arrows that wrap around the flower. And these represent the stages of the process of evangelization. So the process of evangelization is a phrase that's utilized in the church documents that pertain to catechesis and evangelization. So there's a document called the General Directory for Catechesis. There's a newer document called the Directory for Catechesis. And they talk about the process of evangelization, which is basically the church's ministry to people to evangelize them where they are along their journey of faith. And evangelization, is both a moment, but also a process. And so the church has identified stages of that process. So you have stages of the process of evangelization represented by these arrows. You have thresholds of the process of discipleship, or you could just call it more simply the journey of faith. And the stages meet people at different thresholds in order to bring them to the place of missionary discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
So the flower is sort of illustrating all of this all at once, so we can see how it all works together.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, maybe some of the listeners have had the opportunity to participate in Ananias.
Oh
And
yeah,
Ananias has, when you were talking about this, back in 2018, I was fortunate to be out with the Siena Institute and be trained through Ananias. And that process, and they make you really think about your own journey of discipleship,
Hmm.
right? And so while you're describing this, Nick, I'm imagining some of the listeners trying to imagine where they might be
Hmm.
along this journey of thresholds. And if you really have not had an opportunity to learn about the thresholds, Four Intentional Disciples is a good start.
Oh,
Ananias is great. So, just connect with us. We'll help you, give you more resources around it. But when I had to trace my journey, because that's what the exercise is called, it really made me think about, as a Catholic, it really made me be more intentional about my own personal journey and relationship with Jesus Christ, which is what discipleship is.
yeah.
And that really changed my perspective, as a Catholic, what discipleship means. We're baptized in Christ, therefore identified as a disciple of Christ.
Hmm.
But my journey of discipleship, my real personal relationship with Him, is different than that
Different story.
identify, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we
So,
struggle with that as Catholics.
yeah, there's the phrase, you can be sacramentalized but not evangelized,
Yep.
right? So you can have all the sacraments, which means you're fully initiated in the church, but that doesn't always speak to the nature of your relationship with Jesus, which is really what we're after and what this is really all about.
Yeah.
Establishing that relationship and then maturing that relationship. Uh, but yeah, you're totally right. When I travel across the archdiocese and I meet with parishes and I train them on the diagram, the first priority is to give them this foundational knowledge for intentional ministry. But I'm also hoping that this will cause them to reflect on their own journey,
Amen.
and even in the progress of learning this, maybe even make progression along that journey. Because as you're learning about these thresholds, you're also sort of asking yourself, okay, where am I? You know, where, where would I plot myself on the diagram? And so, that's a new question for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Um, and they haven't really been able to articulate that question because they haven't had the language for it. But now I have these thresholds which really help me understand not only another person's journey, but also my own journey.
Mhm.
And so that's a happy consequence of
Yeah.
training people on the diagram for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things I really, really like as I went through the material, um, you start with pre-trust, right?
Yeah.
And trust, and you identify the thresholds at some level, what they are. What I really liked and I thought is very helpful for people who look at the material is you're explaining, hey, here's who is at pre-trust,
Hmm.
and here's what you can consider doing to engage those people at pre-trust. Here's
Hmm.
what it looks like when people are at trust, and here's what you can be doing to engage people there. Here's what it looks like at curiosity.
Hmm.
Something that when you sit around, you know this, Nick, I know this, when we sit around a table with a pastor and leaders, and they're like, but we need to engage people, and here's what we need to do, and you know, all good intentions and all coming from the heart of desiring to draw people in, but at some level, a little misdirected because they don't truly yet understand how to understand where people are at with the thresholds.
Right.
And this really, I think, gives a good starting point for people to have that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, this is really what makes the diagram so powerful because I think what typically happens in ministry is that DREs and pastors, they're just kind of throwing everything up against the wall and seeing what sticks,
Yeah.
you know. And they don't really have a articulated plan for making disciples. They're just sort of hoping, either consciously or unconsciously, that if I try this and that and the other thing, hopefully and eventually something will stick with somebody and we'll make disciples in this place.
Right.
But I think we got to bring more intentionality than that, you know?
Yeah.
And so it all starts with knowing how to understand where people are in their journey,
Yeah.
and if I know where you are in your journey, then I know how I can help you. Not only can I meet your needs where you are, but I can also give you what you need in order to continue on your journey.
Yeah.
Right? And that's huge. I I don't know how you can make disciples without that foundational knowledge.
Yeah.
To me, it's just absolutely essential.
Yeah.
And so that's really where the power of the diagram comes from, is it gives parish ministry leaders the foundational knowledge for intentional ministry.
Yeah.
So yeah, vitally important.
Yeah. And, I think it's really important for us to continue to hear, myself included, how important it is when we're thinking about initiatives at the parish that we really need to know and learn how to do this, where people are at.
Yeah,
Now, there's going to be people at a parish that are at pre-trust. Well, the way you define pre-trust in here, it's true. A lot people who are at pre-trust aren't coming and sitting in the pews.
right.
People at trust, there could be people at trust sitting in the pews.
Mhm,
People at curiosity.
mhm,
So we have to learn how to really understand and listen to where somebody is at along
mhm.
these thresholds. But here's the two side of that coin. We have to learn what it is. But
Yeah,
the only way I've learned how to do that is by really being reflective on my own journey and how that happened.
yeah, yeah. So, you can think back on your own journey and what it was like for you, and that gives you personal experience and experiential knowledge of what it means to be in pre-trust, trust, curiosity, and all the rest. But the best way to discover what the experience like for someone else is to really, to have what Sherry calls a threshold conversation.
Hmm.
You know, she also talks about this in FID, informing intentional cycles. There's a kind of conversation you can have with someone. It's a threshold conversation. She calls it listening evangelization, um, where you you sit down with someone and you basically just create a safe place for them to talk about the history of their relationship with God up to this point in their life.
Hmm.
You know, and it dignifies a person. It gives a person dignity to be heard. It communicates that your journey is important to me, and I don't want to make any assumptions about where you are or tell you what I think you need. I want to discover from you how I can serve and minister to you,
Hmm.
you know? And most people in their life, they don't have a lot of people who care enough to sit down and just listen,
Hmm.
genuinely listen.
Hmm.
You know, Listening all by itself is an extraordinary gift and a dignifying gesture,
Hmm.
right? Uh, so, when you create the space for someone to tell that story, and that story might have victories in it, but also pitfalls, hurts, woundedness, joy, every mix of emotion and human experience. You take the time to listen and to receive that. You're communicating that, I care enough to meet you where you are,
Yeah.
to know what it's like to be you, and to receive both your victories and your failures, your joys and your sorrows, really entirely you. And that, that takes investment and it takes time,
Hmm.
but it's really the best way to discover how to minister to people.
Yeah. You know, one of my passions is really helping people see Jesus as our model of engaging others, and also to help us see how much Jesus really desires to encounter us, right?
Hmm.
And what he models for us is just what you're saying, caring and listening. You know, in the Gospel of John, the call of disciples, the first disciples, Jesus asks, um, "What are you looking for?
Mm.
What are you looking for?" You know,
Yeah.
blind
Such a
man
great question to
Bartimaeus.
ask a person.
Yeah, blind man Bartimaeus. He says, "What can I do for you?"
Mhm.
And the I forget the exact scripture title, but the crippled at the pool. Um,
Hmm.
he says, he asks him, "Hey, do you really want to be healed?"
Hmm.
You know, so these moments of encounter that Jesus shows us, they're not a, a first initial moment of I'm gonna catechize the heck out of you.
Right.
They're
Not
not.
everyone needs catechesis right away.
No, we're not gonna throw heavy theology at you. And I was just talking to um, a non-Christian agnostic yesterday, and said the person said, I just feel like people always proselytize me,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. They,
All,
they they come to the conversation with their own agenda for what they want to achieve.
and I just listened. I just
Yeah.
listened to her, and developed, and definitely she's at that pre-trust, maybe even one step before pre-trust, but you know, but
Yeah.
but that's what we're meant to do,
Hmm.
What are you looking for? You know?
And when I recommend this, I realize that when I recommend this to parish ministry leaders, it's overwhelming at first because they'll say, Nicholas, I've got a 3,000 family parish. You're asking me to sit down individually with every single one of those members of this parish and find out where everyone is and what they need. Like that's absurd. I couldn't do that in 25 years or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so I want to address that concern because that's an anxiety that almost every leader has as soon as I start talking about like getting one-on-one and having a threshold conversation. Uh, but I think there's a lot of different ways to tackle it. First of all, we have an info packet that accompanies the diagram that breaks open what all the parts mean. And in the info packet, what I've tried to do is provide a sort of a character sketch of what a person looks like. What does a person look like in pre-trust? What do they look like in curiosity or in beginning disciple, right? And so, um, you can look for these character types like in your population. You don't always have to have a one-on-one conversation in order to see them. And so you can get a general sense, if I want to serve people in the early thresholds, what is my pre-evangelization ministry going to look like? Okay. And you can make some pretty good ministry decisions just based on that character sketch,
Hmm.
right? Um, so that's how to sort of tackle it broadly. You know, I do think we need to have those conversations whenever they naturally occur, and we can also make them happen. But especially when somebody's calling you and they're interested in OCIA, sit down and I'd love to hear your story, right? When someone new registers for the parish, hey, let's sit down. I'd love to hear your story. When parents come to baptize their child, hey, let's sit down. I'd love to hear your story. you know
Hmm.
and if you just sees those opportunities that just naturally occur in ministry, you're checking that off pretty well. You know, if you think about how many of opportunities like that you don't seize, you
Hmm.
know, then you really have it baked into your day to day, the opportunity to get to know a lot of people in this more intentional way.
Yeah.
But I think another way that you eat the whole elephant, so to speak, is to get more people involved in this sort of listening evangelization.
Yeah.
The DRE isn't the only one that should be doing this. The
Correct.
youth minister can be doing it too. The you know the small group leaders, the admin assistant that registers new parishioners, the pastor, the deacon, the sacristan, the maintenance guy. You know, I
Yeah.
would like to see everybody bought in. You
Yeah.
know, and these other people in the parish, they have access to people and they have relationships that you don't have. And
Hmm.
so you just sort of broaden the umbrella, you know, and now as a team, you're really getting to know the parish like really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ministry, I think, just to say this real quick, ministry needs to come from that deep awareness of your people. You know, I think a lot of times ministry leaders, they just sort of make decisions, but they never step back and consider, do we really know what our people need? Have we heard from them about what we need? Or are we just making assumptions that aren't based on anything?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it's possible.
Yeah. One of the things I think we always have to remember and remind ourselves, because when we think about ministry, we almost think of it in a way as it's something that we have created.
Mm,
And the Catechism says that the very source of ministry is Jesus Christ.
hmm
It's the gospel message and the healing
hmm
of Jesus Christ. So our ministry is not something that we have created. The ministry is the gospel message. So therefore, sitting down with someone to minister to them, you are bringing the presence, carrying the gospel message and bringing the presence of Jesus Christ there. And
Yeah.
I also think,
Yeah.
we have I have found that people have such a strong perception when it comes to engaging people that, well, people who are bringing their baby to be baptized don't really want to sit down because they're just coming to get baptized and that's it. Or
hmm
people that are bringing their kids to religious ed don't really want to sit down because the parents are just bringing their kids to religious ed because it's just something that they have them do. And you know what? In many cases, that is true. And that's why we're called to be missionary and to sit with people.
hmm
It's Is it easy? No, it's not. No, it's not. When Jesus sent out the disciples, he sent them out two by two because knowing that mission is difficult. I just did a podcast with a Monsignor on saints.
hmm
And we were talking about the small S saints and the large S saints, and we're all saints. We are all saints called saints,
Sure.
right? And in that journey, in our journey, um, we it's going to be difficult. We're going to be criticized. We are at some level martyrs of the Christian for the Christian faith.
hmm
We're going to be. So I say all that because if you're listening and you have this perception, but people don't want to sit down,
Yeah.
turn it around and that's part of the mission.
Yeah. And, I mean, I've found that people are a lot more receptive than we might assume that they
Yeah.
are. You know, People will rarely turn down a free lunch. You know, um, they'll people like to talk about themselves. It sounds harsh, but it's just a reality.
Yep.
How to win favor and influence people. I can't think of the exact name of that book, but Carnegie, he talks about how people like to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
So you give them the space to do that, and they'll talk about a whole lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
um, and if it's friendly and it's it's a soft entry point, you're not asking a whole lot. We're not asking them to, I'm not asking you to impress me or anything. I'm really just interested in you, because I care,
Yeah.
and so, it's up to us to make the invitation and see what the Spirit does with that, right? But I think another way to approach this concern about, are they open to this kind of conversation? Maybe they're open to this kind of conversation, but not with me. You know, we as leaders, we also have to be humble enough to admit that someone else would be better to have this conversation than I would.
Yep.
Maybe this parent has a better relationship with the youth minister than
Or even
she
another
does with.
parent, or even another
Oh
parent.
yeah,
Active
right.
in the
Yeah, you as you invite people into this mission and into listening evangelization, then you have uh, opportunities to make everyone feel
yeah.
comfortable and welcome,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Nick, I can only imagine the amount of experience that you've been able to capture by working with the parishes, not only teaching this, but also having conversations about it, learning from the impact that this has
Mhm.
had for parishes. Um, Quickly tell me, just how long have you been using this specific model? Has it been a couple years now?
Oh yeah, gosh, let me think. I'd say at least three,
Yeah, yeah.
at least 3 years or so.
Yeah, so I'm sure what I'd love to do is have you come back. And what we'll do is because to sit here and have a whole conversation on the impact, because I know listeners and viewers are saying, okay, now tell us about the impact. It's happening, right?
Yeah,
It's happening. If it wasn't happening, you wouldn't be using it, right? Like,
right.
wouldn't be using it. But to help our listeners and viewers, what would be your recommendation? They just heard about this. They just
Hmm.
hopefully it intrigued you as listeners
Hmm.
enough to at least look at it and then maybe look at it with the ears that you just heard what we talked about. What would be your recommendation for someone moving from this conversation? What would be some next steps that you would want to encourage people to do after listening to us?
I would say, first of all, dive in, learn as much about it as you possibly can. We have a whole website devoted to the diagram. It's called missionaryparish.com. You can go there. You can learn about every threshold along the journey of faith, every stage of the process of discipleship, all of the different ministry imperatives, everything that can be drawn from this diagram is available on the website for you to learn and to grow. So that's step one. You know, Scour the website, read the info packet, fully immerse yourself in this foundational knowledge. That's step one. And then step two is share it with someone else. You
Mhm.
know, we created a whole small group study around the diagram that's also available on the website. We scripted out videos and we were on location all over the Archdiocese. It was a massive project to create this small group study. But we have a study in 6 sessions that you can take with with your family, with your team. If you're on an RCIA team, you could an RCI or oh, I'm sorry, OCIA team could work through this together. A pastor could work through it with his staff. A DRE could work through it with his catechists. Um, a sacramental prep coordinator could work through it with his volunteers. Youth minister could work through it with his leadership team, right? Uh, and so, there's a lot of opportunity not only to learn more about yourself, but also to share it with others, get other people involved. Because really, I think if we're going to have that movement from maintenance to mission, everyone has to be on the same page around what it takes to get there.
Hmm.
And that's where this diagram comes into play. So that means learning as much as you can about it yourself, but then also sharing it with others.
Yeah. And what I would add to that as well, and those are all great suggestions, is if you haven't journeyed through the thresholds yourself, do that. Really learn the thresholds, trace your own journey.
Mhm.
Ananias provides that. I think the second book, Fruitful Discipleship, right, by Sherry Weidel.
Yeah, that's on the charisms.
Yeah, on the charisms. But trace your own journey
Mhm.
through the thresholds as well.
Yeah, and as you're learning this stuff, you'll just naturally do it. The small group sessions that we've created, the reflection questions for each session, they ask you about what you're learning, but they also ask you about your own journey.
Mm,
And they ask you to reflect on your own journey, based on the threshold of the stage that you're learning about in that session. So there's tons of opportunity not only to learn how to do intentional ministry, but also to learn more about your own journey.
yeah, great.
So yeah, highly suggest that.
Well, this has been great, Nick. Love to have you back so we can talk a little bit about the
Love to
impact
come back.
of it as well.
Yeah, we didn't really have a chance to let's talk about each threshold.
Yeah.
Let's talk about each stage so we could break it down a little deeper
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's what we'll do next time. We'll break it down even deeper. This is a great introduction for the listeners. Let them chew on it a little bit, right? And then
okay.
we'll come back, we'll break it down, and maybe you can share some of the stories from around the diocese as what the impact has been, right?
I love that.
Yeah. So thanks so much, Nick. This has been wonderful. Listeners, make sure you check out the show notes. Make sure you hit subscribe so that you're notified as new episodes are come out. And we'll catch you next time. Nick, thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you, sir.
And God bless everyone. Take care. Well, I hope this conversation encourages you enough to at least go and take a look at the document, read through it. You can find the link to it in the description below. And I also encourage you to hit the follow and like button because that will help the algorithm send this content to other people who are like you, searching for ways to grow in evangelization and discipleship and strengthen the conversations that they have at their parishes. So thanks again, and I look forward to being with you in the next episode.